I welcome you all to the Frontlist Spotlight session. Since we all know that November is National Novel Writing Month, I, Priyanshi, media representative and editor of Frontlist, am delighted to host this session. An editor is an authority by dint of nature of his work. Regarding editing, what not to do is equally important to what you do. Hence, this session topic is what not to do as an editor. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome our distinguished panelists who will be sharing their insights for the same and talking on this topic, what not to do as an editor. So I welcome Sushant Jha, Menka Shivdasani, and Tripti Nainwal. Before we begin, I would like to give a small brief about everyone here. Sushant Jha is a commissioning editor, Penguin Random House, Hindi Pocket Books, and is Hindi translator of Ramchandra Guha Gandhi series. He has earlier worked with India Today group handling its social media operations and is an alumnus of Indian Institute of Mass Communication, Delhi. I welcome you, sir, on behalf of the whole Frontlist Media team. Welcome,
Thank
sir.
you.
Menka Shivdasani is Mumbai-based writer and editor who appeared in several publications, both in India and elsewhere. She has presented her poetry numerous times on radio and television in India and various India and international events. I welcome you, ma'am, on behalf of the whole Frontlist Media team. Tripti Nainwal, she's an associate editor of Amar Chitrakatha. She found herself wandering through various media formats, including scripting for televisions and documentaries, editing documents for international NGOs, and authoring several coffee table books and books for children. I welcome you, Tripti, on behalf of whole Frontlist Media team.
Thank you.
So, to win the editing battle, we need to understand the foundation of each mistake that we make while we do editing. So, without any further ado or delay, let's begin our session and the questionnaire rounds that we're going to discuss and talk and communicate to our audience. So, firstly, I would like to put a question that procrastination is one of the major characteristics as a writer, but not as an editor. How do you oscillate between these two views? Like, anyone who would like to pick up this question is, free to it. So maybe we can begin with Menka, Tripti, or Sushant, anyone.
Can I go?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think as a writer and, being a writer and an editor, I think, the biggest difference is that when you're a writer, you have like a blank sheet of paper in front of you. And I think, I read somewhere that there's nothing more lonely than a blank sheet of paper. But I think it's also, there's nothing more daunting than a blank sheet of paper. So when you want to write, and if you can't, you don't get that perfect first sentence, or you don't get, the words aren't coming right or whatever, you end up doing everything else, other than write. Like, suddenly you want to clean the fridge, you want to do, all kinds of stuff,
Definitely.
and everything else seems more attractive. So that is where you procrastinate. Like, you do everything else, anything you find, other than actually writing, which is what you want to do, but for some reason, you don't end up doing it. But as an editor, you already have the words in front of you, right? You already have a fully, a manuscript full of words. So it is not that, so there's no reason to procrastinate. I mean, it might be a very badly written manuscript or whatever. I mean, it doesn't have to be this thing, but the words are there. So, you can just like get down to it, start doing
Yeah, you
whatever.
can begin it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think that is, for me at least, that is the reason I procrastinate as a writer and maybe not as an editor.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the others agree, but yeah.
Okay, basically, yeah, I totally agree with your point, Tripti. What I believe is that most editors in the industry have to be and has to be a writer first, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So as it is very obvious fact that procrastination is one of the major characteristic feature of writer, just because we need time to think how to portray, how to pen down our, first thought, maybe what extent to explore, what tonality should we make, so that these little elements make the writers procrastinate the whole thing. And but not as an editor, definitely, as you said, because you already have a thing. You have you know very well that when to begin with it,
Yeah.
and how to begin with it. You have everything on your plate. So yeah, definitely, that's a very good point that we have discussed today here. Again, I
Point of view is slightly different. It's the sense that I would not use the word procrastination for writing, but rather it's allowing an idea to brew and to mature in your subconscious before you can commit it to the page. Because when a poem is ready to be written, it will find its way outside. And as the editor of my own poetry, in fact, I would procrastinate. I would put aside the poem and forget about it for a few days, and then I would go back with a fresh eye to see what requires changing. This, of course, only works with poetry. When you're doing journalistic editing or journalistic writing, you don't have that luxury of time, so you just have to get on with it, whether you're writing or editing. And since I've done both, I can manage both of them quite
true.
well.
Yeah, completely. Uh, Sushant sir, any views on the same?
Uh, sometimes when I write originally, of course, I procrastinate because I have to put my views and I get it delayed and delayed. But when I do the editing things, I know that what the manuscript is and how the translation has come. So obviously there's no room for procrastination, but still I know sometimes that some manuscripts are badly written or not up to my mark, or some translation are bad. So I sometimes procrastinate while editing also. So I take the early hour in the morning when nobody calls me and there is no meeting. I'll say from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. I do some kind of editing when I fresh, my minds are fresh. But in the day, maybe sometimes I work on 2 or 3 books. So some books are very flowing, very good written, and some books have some problem. So there, I do have to do the haircut or do some cooking time kind of things. So I procrastinate at that time. But that happens very little. But I procrastinate even while editing when I do the blurb of the cover. That is the creative thing which I have to do, and I have to negotiate with the author also. So that is the creative thing. But then that takes time, little time.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
but not while editing. In editing, say I procrastinate 20% of times, not 80%.
All right, all right. So I mean, this is the normal goal that we face. We everyone as an editor and a writer face. Okay. So moving forward, I have another question also. That edit while you read. Do not read the copy too many times. Does the statement ring true to you, or do you have any insight into how rereading affects editing?
Can I speak first?
Please go ahead.
Yeah.
It depends on books, different books. Some books are so well written, and then I get the sense from the synopsis and manuscript or the content part also. I already know the author already and know the storyline, and the story is so flowing that I don't need to reread it again. But some books are really different and they're complicated, and I have to make it a flowing thing for the reader, for a common person. So sometimes I do the editing while reading, but most of the time I read it before. I read it once and then mark the problematic parts. Then I go to the hair cutting part of the manuscript.
All
So
right.
it depends on different books. And for the translation also, because some translation are very complicated, some subjects are complicated, and there is mismatch between the translator and the author, and the content part of that. So sometimes that is different thing. So in translation, of course, I do the reading first, then I edit the translation. But in the original book, sometimes I do the editing while reading, but sometimes many times I edit after the reading.
All right, sir.
For me, I have this really bad habit of editing while I'm reading because errors just, it's glaringly obvious. And when the writer is sitting with you, as sometimes happens within my own family, sometimes my daughter would show me her novel, and I point out commas and question marks, and she'd get very upset. She'd say, "Just read it for structure, read it, commas and spellings and all that can happen later." So I do believe that one needs to read the work several times. And in my experience, I found that every reading would yield fresh errors or a new way to tighten the text. And while editing a book, I would read it at least twice, if not more. And that's just before it goes to the printer. Of course, after it goes to the printer and you come back with the proofs, you find further errors.
For the errors, yeah.
And there are times when, in fact, after the book has been published, and I've read it so many times and it's just become a blind spot.
Yeah,
I find
definitely.
an error after that, even,
You're
having gone.
pinpointed for that, yeah. That okay, that has the error.
Yeah, and having said that, I think that at some point, because there is no end to editing, at some point you just have to let it go and say, okay, now enough. It needs to go to the printer and it needs to meet a deadline. And you're going to see that proof anyway, and you're going to point out more errors anyway.
Yeah. So maybe
Yes.
there are additional external factors also that affect our rereading time and finding out the errors. What I personally believe, being an editor also, meeting the deadlines and many other stuffs that we have to follow the process. So yeah. Tripti, any view on the same?
Yeah, I agree. I actually think that both the sentences are true in the sense that, read while you edit. I think it works very well for your own writing. I mean, edit while you read works very well for your own writing, because as you're writing, if you edit, um, you tend to, it doesn't get like, you don't tend to go overboard with your writing. I think all of us, a lot of us writers, me especially, I think, we are very possessive of our own writing. So when we think we haven't written a single extra word and, whatever, until it goes to the editor, and then you like, in for a shock, because obviously the editor is looking at it with a, totally different eye. So yes, definitely your own writing, definitely I think one should edit, as you're going through it. uh the other thing is, when I get manuscripts as an editor, I think one needs to read it a couple of times. At least, of course, the first read is always the freshest. I mean, you catch the most errors at that time. But a lot of things that don't make sense to you in the first reading, they make sense the second
The
time.
second time.
So yeah, so you're able to do a better, you're able to understand what the author is saying and things like that. So that, yeah, so both, but obviously you can't reread it too many times, because then, it just becomes, then you just sort of glaze over everything, because it's all become so familiar, nothing is fresh anymore. You end up missing a lot of things.
Yes.
So yeah, but one thing I would like to say is that in Amar Chitra Katha, no, since we do graphic biographies and comics, all of the entire editorial likes to sit together and do the editing, because there's like so many panels in a page, and so much happening in each panel, that one person, it's very difficult, because you end up missing, or sometimes you miss continuity, sometimes you miss so many things. So
Mhm.
all of us sit together and we do it, and that's actually a lot of fun also, because
Yeah.
it's and one person has an eye for color, the other person has an eye for jewelry, noticing this pendant is not there, that one is there, that kind of thing. So yeah, so in that, it doesn't I mean, the more you look at it, the better it
The
gets.
better it is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. That's how it goes around. Yeah.
yeah.
Definitely true. True. Well, moving ahead, how do we feel as an editor about not adding our own quirks to the writer's initial draft in order to avoid to lose the real essence of the writer, because many times while we do editing, there are flares of the touch we want to, this is not going with the sync, we should remove this. And while we do that, what I personally think is we really lose the writer's real essence, what the writer is trying to convey to the audience. So what as an editor we should do or not do in order to avoid this dilemma?
Yes, someone who's edited both poetry, my own as well as other people's poetry, as well as prose books, as well as journalistic articles. My approach tends to differ according to each kind of writing. Yeah, so when I'm editing a poem, I know from experience how much it would have taken that writer to write that poem, and how many times that poet would have gone through it before it actually came to somebody for editing. So I'm very mindful of that. So I'd be extra careful while editing it. I'd be sure to work with the poet. I would suggest changes, discuss them with the writer, and I'd be aware that the writer would be very sensitive about any change as a poet. Yeah. But that's because a writer of a poem has put his or her heart into the work. As a journalistic article, or even some kinds of prose books that I've edited, I know that it's all from the head. And I know that certain things need to be done objectively and they need to be changed. And I will work with the editor, with the writer as a team player. But I would stand my ground and say, look, this is something that needs to be done. And I would expect the writer to, at least give me the space to say so. And
True.
let the work be edited.
Completely true. Tripti, anything to add on? Sushant, anything to add on?
Uh, I I do not put my views in the writings, but certainly I do most of the non-fiction books like biographies and political books and social books. So I don't have experience in poem editing, poetry editing, but what I do is I do not put my views, but certainly I look for the facts and the legal things, what happens, because in our system there is legal editor also. So we first send the books to the legal team and they flag many things that this should be there or this should not be there as per the uh, legal things of our land, many sensibilities also. Apart from that, I also see that some sentences or some words are can be made very attractive also. So I work with the authors and they, most of the cases, they agree with me. And sometimes we have also friendly fight, friendly clash, that they don't agree with something. That no, this should be there. This name is very particular. This is something because uh, mostly I work in Hindi language, and some authors are very sensitive to their words. So sometimes we have friendly fight, but I don't put my views. I only see the facts and the line, whatever line the author has taken, that should be fulfilled and beautifully, and the text should be flowing very good. So I do hear I am a cook, I am a doctor, I am a hair cutter. So
All right.
that's the thing. Only
So, so
in the
basically,
non-fiction.
we give the upper hand to the writers, right? Whenever there's this tussle or a friendly fight that we
Yeah,
have with the writer.
sometimes happens. Only I make it try to make it lucid language wise.
Yeah.
It should not be boring. Sometimes it can get rearranged. Chapter 5 can be put at chapter 3. So that happens, but
All
not
right.
much, not putting my views.
Okay. All right.
But you also have to be aware that when a book is printed, it's a very final thing. And it's going to be there for several decades afterwards, even for that one reader who may find it. So you have to know when you can stand your ground and you have to be firm about certain things.
Exactly true. I agree the same. Right. Well, moving ahead, uh, When an editor estimates the volume of his work, he or she usually goes by the number of pages or words, like we generally do. Like first, whatever the editing comes to us, or like personally to me, what I do is I see the okay, these are the things that I need to edit. These are the number of pages. But the question here, which occupies my mind here, is as an editor, how can I ensure a respectable quality of the writer that I'll approve? So, what's the ground stand that everyone's going to have on this statement that I've just made?
For my list, it depends on books to books. If there is a Ram Guha book that is 600 or 700 pages, so the subject demands the length of the pages, its extensiveness. So I can't cut the pages or I can't minimize the text. But sometimes, say, this is a very metro read kind of books, or a little travelogue, or a love story. So normally we publish 200 pages to 300 pages in between 50,000 words to 90,000 words, so that we also tell to our authors. But in some books, like a book on freedom struggle or a book on history, may go to 300 to 400 pages. And we, along with our sales team and marketing teams, we all decide and also talk to author that this should be the ideal thing, and we don't put pressure for that. But in other books like travelogue or fiction, we don't go to much length.
All right. All right. Tripti, anything to add on to this?
No, not really, because for us, I mean, our books are, I mean, our things are all obviously pre-decided, no, the number of pages and everything, and the kind of editing we do is very different, in terms of from the kind of editing that Sushant is talking about. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think there is any
All right.
thing that yeah.
All right.
So for me, when I look at the number of, I don't think the number of pages or words is really the criteria, because that can be a very misleading parameter. In some cases, the work involved may be very high, even if the word count is low.
Yes.
And in some cases, in my case, and frankly, I don't edit poetry for monetary considerations, right? So for me, the first thing would be that I need to make this book the best that I can do. Because that, as a professional, I need to ensure that I'm giving it everything that I have. Whether it's earning money or not is besides the point. And in poetry, there is no money that we can even think about, unfortunately. So because it's my reputation on the line, I would give it my best. And I would make changes at every stage, even at looking at the final proofs before the book actually comes out, because that's really the way it is with words, right? They are very treacherous. There's always something more that needs to be done to polish them. So for me, it's not the word count or the the difficulty. There have been times when I've been asked to edit non-fiction book, a self-help book, for example, which I did through my company, The Source. We edit books, we write books. So I found that it was really badly written, and there was so much that needed to be changed about it. And I realized the only way to do that was almost like medicine, one a day. Every day I would get up, I would start one chapter, finish the chapter, and move on to the next before I got on with other work. Because then you just have to put your mind to it and say, okay, I need to polish this and make this as good as I can.
We need to be true to our profession that we are into it, like giving our 100%, as you said. Whatever we know, we have to put our heart and soul into it. Whatever, yeah, whatever
Even
the
if it annoys you, even if it's something that you'd rather not be doing, you'd rather be cooking or watching television or whatever else. If there's a commitment and there's another writer involved, then I think you have to give it that.
Yeah, agreed. Totally.
I'd just like to add something
Sure.
to what Menka just said, because she mentioned something about being very mindful about the author, about the writer. I think that's that's like absolutely the way that one should focus. You have to keep the right. I mean, like, you see, the way I think of it is it's like an supposing you have an illustration, with lots of pencil marks and shading and things like that. And as an editor, one has to know which of those pencil marks have to be rubbed out, and which one has to stay, so that the original illustration is, really clear and lucid, and this thing. It's not about making your own illustration. Right. I
Yeah.
mean, you can't do that as an editor. So you just have to be like, so that is what, like what she's saying about being very true to your work, because that is also, we are erasing, but that is equally important, but to help something else, shine through. So
Yeah.
I think that is where the worth of an editor sort of comes through, yeah, which is a lot of it, so much of it is behind the scenes, that I mean, people don't really know about it, but I think yes, I think it's good we're having such sessions.
Yeah, definitely talk about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, uh, a writer is often tempted to present unique thoughts uniquely. As an editor, how do you ensure that the copy is engaging and that the most readers will relate to it?
I think you just have to be as objective as you can when you're editing it, and let the writer's unique voice show. You can't erase that when you're editing copy.
Yeah.
It just requires a lot of focus and concentration, and I think it also comes with experience. Because as an editor, you'll want to be making changes. As an enthusiastic young editor, you'll want to be making all kinds of changes because you want to put your stamp on it. And as a young writer, I've also suffered that with young editors.
Mhm.
But I think as you realize, as you go through more and more copy, as you go through more and more books, you realize that you have to be very, very careful about what you're doing, because it's not your voice you're playing with, it's somebody else's voice.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's this limitation also that we need to have a control on it, how much and what type of edit we do while reading the copies or make it more engaging. We cannot put our own very own thought to it and destroy the original work of whatever the writer has written.
Exactly.
Truly agree with you. Okay, so moving on, here's a very funny question that I've made for all of you. Not funny, also like it's very engaging one, which I thought like everyone would like it. So, among the following five options, how would you rank the common mistakes that you find while editing? So I'll be giving you the five options. All three of you have to, rank it, and then we can discuss on it, and we can see that if we match on the same ranking or not. So the options are: first, grammar mistake; second, misspelling and typo errors; third, punctuation error; fourth, structural blunders; and fifth, citation inaccuracy.
So
Like
these
if
are
you
common mistakes, or what matters more to us?
yeah, among the following five options, how would you rank the common mistakes that you find?
Common.
Yeah,
Common ones. Okay.
I'll repeat it again:
Mm.
grammar mistakes, misspelling and typos, punctuation errors, structural blunders, and citation inaccuracy.
So I would say punctuation number one, because a lot of writers think that punctuation doesn't really matter. It's too small an issue for them to worry about as they're telling their great stories or writing their great poems. But this is something that I learned as a very young writer when I was, when Nissim Ezekiel used to look at my poems when I was about 16, and he used to tell me, but you missed a comma in that line. And yeah, and I would quarrel with him about it. I would say that, it doesn't matter because here I am writing this great poem about love and,
Mm.
lost love. And then you're telling me about a comma. And he said, no, it's the small things that matter.
That matters.
It's things that
Exactly.
make that difference.
Mm.
So I would definitely put punctuation as the first. I would put misspelling and typos as number two.
All right.
Grammar mistakes as number three. Structural blunders, I would, and maybe this is too much of an assumption, but I would assume that the writer has given enough attention to this before it has come to me to not make structural blunders. Of course, it's my job to find out. And citation inaccuracy, I would definitely look at it, but last.
Yeah.
After I'm comfortable with the text, I would then ensure that the fine print is okay.
All right. Lovely. Moving on, Tripti, your rankings.
I think misspelling and typos. Lots and lots that one gets to see. Then grammar. Uh, and then what was it? Punctuation.
Punctuation.
Yeah. And structural blunders, which are not that common, but to me personally, they're the most important. Like if I'm editing a document, I see that. I mean, it takes a while sometimes to understand what the person is trying to say, because it's just because of this, this kind of attention not paid to, to how exactly it should, how a thought follows through or something. And I see that, the minute you just change something, or thoda open niche, thoda adjustment, and it's like magic actually. It suddenly makes so much sense. So to me personally, structural blunders are the most important ones, but they don't happen that often, like Menka said. So yeah, so those are not that common. So it would be structural blunders fourth, and citation would be fifth. Yeah.
All right. Sushant.
I agree with Menka ji. The punctuation error is first and the spelling is second.
All right.
And for me, citation is very important because I mostly do the non-fiction work. So sometimes it leads to legal things also. So I have to put the every fact with proof. So everything is important, but obviously punctuation comes first in my mind. That's the spelling.
All right. So punctuation and then misspelling and typos and citation, and the fourth would be your grammar or your structural blunders.
Yes. For original books, I see a structure also, but for translation, the one type of editing comes from the English team. So I do mostly the Hindi translation. So there's no much scope for the structural rehash. But for original books, I do the structural thing also. As I already said, that sometimes I put the chapter 8 to chapter 6 number because that fits in the scheme of flow. And obviously, after talking with the author. But in translation, that is not the main thing. But punctuation and spelling hits the eye.
Agreed, definitely. So I think we all are on the same page of the role as an editor that can be thought similar to the master chef who provides the finish to the content. So before we end our session, I would like a key messaging from each one of you to our audience who's watching it, or the key budding, the editors who really want to, learn, and the key messaging from your end to them.
I'd just like to share a quote. I don't really have the name for who said this, but it's a draft while drunk, but revise when sober. This is obviously not literal that you don't need to be drunk when you're writing, but you need to be in a different space when you are writing. And you need to be removed from the writing when you are editing.
Yes.
And you need to pay attention to the small things when you're editing. I think that's
very beautifully said. Very beautifully said. And I hope our readers and our audience would definitely catch on to this. Moving on, Tripti, your key messaging to our audience.
I didn't really have one, but now that Menka has mentioned this one, I think, I think I would like to say that God is in the details. So, details are like, one tends to overlook them, but those are what make all the difference. So, for editors, pay attention to the details.
Detailing.
Yeah.
Every little detail matters.
Every little detail matters.
Yeah, and every small details will make a count to a big, huge chunk
Absolutely. Yes.
Moving on, Sushant, your key messaging to our audience.
Menka and Tripti ji has some detail. So I think that as an editor, I'm detached with the text. Sometimes I get ideologically attacked by the text, but I work like Mahatma Buddha and get detached there. So I look at like a common reader, and I make it more and more lucid and more flowing. And that is the first thing that all editors must read other text also, so that they get experience with how other people are editing, writing, because there is no end of the road. There is no perfection in this trade. Always you will find that there is some room for perfection.
Definitely true. Very, very truly said that. Very true. So before we end our session, on behalf of whole Frontlist Media team, I would like to tell our audience and everyone, our distinguished panelists present here, that let's not just let November go by without taking our greatest novel ideas and turning into reality. Let's keep writing and editing with the spirits high, with the good spirit high, always and forever. Thank you so much for joining with us, and this session was really great and insightful to our audience. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks for having us. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.